I was from New Jersey, then I moved to Pennsylvania, and once I moved there, I had a friend named Doug who was like a metal dude. He started bringing me to shows in like Allentown and stuff, and I didn't really dig the metal bands too much, but then I started seeing some hardcore bands in Allentown, a place called Airport Music Hall, and bands like Sick of It All I saw there, Knots in Front, and I really got into hardcore then. Krutch was me and a few friends. First song we recorded was in 1989. We did like one song. We sat on it forever because we didn't know what to do with it. So we recorded a song called Our Thing. There was 5 of us, and one of the guys was Sean Bilo. He was in a band called No Retreat years later when he left Krutch. And throughout the years of Krutch, we would pick up different guys, different bands, and then that's kind of how we made some relationships with different areas, different bands. Eventually we would have some guys from Feeble, from the Overdrives, you know, from, like I said, No Retreat, and whatever. There's so many different bands that came and went, you know, members. But it started in '89 with just us in the basement trying to sound like Agnostic Front, but we really didn't know how to play anything, you know, really crappy sounding. But eventually it would be all right, you know. But we never took it too serious, you know. We kind of skipped out on a lot of good opportunities. I wish we could have did.
Yeah, but
I don't know. The earliest band I heard of that was from Pennsylvania, that was a hardcore band, was No One's Hero. I remember getting a 7-inch in Allentown after a show. But I don't know what kind of activity they had going around. I don't know if they booked shows, if they brought outside bands in. But that was the earliest band I remember. That's when we used to always go to Lehigh Valley for shows because nothing was going on in Stroudsburg. Just a random show would pop up here and there. And eventually we would hit a show in Scranton, actually music, and then we would never go back to Lehigh Valley again because it was always fucked up out there, you know what I mean? So once we started going to Scranton, we met a lot of people. Things changed up, and that became not our home base, but where we played more frequent than anywhere else. CC's was real important. I mean, it was constant shows. Every weekend, we would be there no matter what. We didn't even know who was playing, and it was sometimes we'd go up there and be surprised. I remember one time going up there, and it was snowing. We just knew there was a show up there. We got up there, and we saw the owner, this guy Vince, at the door, and we said, "Who's playing tonight?" He said, "Madball." We were like, "What?" Love Madball. We couldn't even believe that. There was like 11 people in the club, but it was a real bad snowstorm. But he booked some really good shows in that place, man. And even though it was like 45 minutes from us, it was the closest place that we could see shows without going to the New York City, which would be the only other option would be New Jersey or New York City for people in Stroudsburg, you know. So CC's was real important because eventually we'd get a little bit tight with Vince, book our own shows, be able to bring outside bands from Connecticut, bands from Boston, and he kind of let you do what you want, you know. But there was an element up there that didn't like CC's, and you know, a group of bands and kids that wanted to boycott CC's and play other places. I never got that, man. I always felt welcome there, and it was a good, comfortable place. You know, Vince was a businessman, and he's not going to pay you unless you make a deal with him to get paid. But if you go up there saying, "Oh, we'll play tonight," and he's just expecting you to play and then go home, you're not getting nothing. But if you tell him what's up, you know, he was all right, man. Vince was all right, and that place was cool. So many. I mean, it was a weekly basis. Like, there was a lot of great shows. And whether, you know, there'd be some freaky stuff happening, or a fight break out, or, you know, just an outsider coming in causing a little ruckus, there was always something going on. But just the shows that I saw there, saw everybody there, you know, from you know, early, like Chromax shows. One of the first shows of Warzone coming back after they were on a long hiatus. I actually booked it. We had Warzone, Bulldoze, Crown of Thorns, 1 for 1, and my band Krutch, and it was like 30 people there. I thought it was going to be like, you know, the show of the year, but it didn't work out like that. But it just endless amounts of show. I couldn't even begin. Right now is a good time to go flashing to this flyer and that flyer and all of that. But Old Man CC's is what we would call him. He would call everybody a chiseler. And if he thought you were trying to sneak in, you were a chiseler. But it came to the point where you would hand him money and he would still call you a chiseler. Like everybody was a chiseler to this guy. He never would smile. You could see him, you know, 100 times a year. You could talk to him, but he didn't want to know anybody, man. He was a funny dude. I wonder if he's still around, old man.
He's actually alive and 95 years old.
Wow. Spanky's short-lived spot, had some good shows. I tried to really get in there and make it work, but the owner was like, he was a little nutty. He was kind of like this mob-type dude, and he was hard to deal with because he thought everything was gonna make him rich, you know what I mean? But it didn't work out like that. Nobody's getting rich doing this. It's definitely not him. But he put a few shows in my hand, and they did good. And then if he said, give me X amount for this show, and it did good, the next show he wants double that. And then the next show, to the point where you can't deal with him anymore, you know what I mean? So that was short-lived. A couple things broke out there, but it was a comfortable spot. And for Stroudsburg, you know, it's all we could really ask for at the time because we had nothing going on. Venues never last down there.
What?
Some early Stroudsburg bands, yeah, Living Proof was a band that a friend of mine, Eddie, was a singer for, and I think they did a 7-inch they put out. Then there was a band, Surrounded, that was around back then, and they were good guys. We did it. Krutch actually did a split 7-inch with Surrounded, and Surrounded, I think the drummer went on to be like a drum tech with some bigger bands. Like I think he like sits in with Slayer and stuff like that. Works for them. And Keith, the guitar player for that band, he's doing a lot of big things. He was actually Limp Bizkit's tour manager and Korn's tour manager, and now he has his own management company. He does like sports management. He does like Rampage Jackson and stuff like that. So he did well for himself. But that was another band. Who else was from Stroudsburg? We had No Retreat, who was like the main dude was from Stroudsburg, but when he moved out to Pittsburgh is when he popped it off, found the members. Then we had a band called Feeble, which is actually like the singer of my new band, not my new band, the band I'm in now, was from a band called Feeble. And Feeble was cool because back then everybody was trying to be heavier than each other, tougher than each other. And Feeble came out being, you know, more melodic, punk rock element, not scared to show that side. Yo, Erie is, I mean, I only played out there a handful of times. It was always great. Yeah. But when I was younger, I remember a real strong presence from Erie. You know, their record labels, they had their own labels up there, their own venues. And now there's guys, you know, that really blew up on the tattoo scene, tattooists, tattoo shops. And they spread out. They're like all over the country now, the guys from Erie. Pittsburgh was always cool, a lot of friends out there. But back in the day, Pittsburgh wasn't too friendly with like bands like us just because all of the venues were like mainstream big venues where you needed like a booking agent to get in. It wasn't until later that somebody stepped up and started doing some underground shows in Pittsburgh. But Pittsburgh was cool. Lehigh Valley scene was really strong, you know, years back. With a place like Scarlett O'Hara's, even though it was kind of a, you know, wacky ownership, they had pretty good shows. So it was a decent scene, man. Within the, you know, and these kids back then, I mean, driving 5.5 hours was not even like a thought. It was just like, yeah, let's go. You know?
Kind of
took away the art.
Yep.
Took away the you know. Well, I mean, you're still making a flyer on the internet. You can make it look dope. But back then, you know, cutting and pasting and stuff. And I always like had made a lot of flyers. If you could find them, I'd like to see them. I made a lot of flyers with like boxers on there, and I cut out this picture. You know, paste it against a different, you know, it was fun to make flyers and put them out there. And, you know, it was harder though. I mean, a lot of bands back then had mailing lists. We had a mailing list. And once every other week, we'd be at the post office sending out hundreds of letters filled with stickers. You know, maybe one main flyer with a list of shows and a flyer for each individual show, an ad for a homemade demo. You know, that's how we really worked about back then. And then the internet came, and that definitely helped, but at the same time it helped.
Yeah.
I got a lot of scrubs out there, you know what I'm saying? Yeah. Oh yeah, it was definitely overlooked. New York had a really cool scene, but the New York scene is like, I mean, let's face it, you got the master bands, you got the king bands, you could call them, you know, Agnostic Front, Sick of It All, Madball, you got the legendary type Murphy's Law type bands. But then after this, you know, I mean, what was the last real strong New York City scene?
Yeah.
New York State, I mean, yeah, the state of New York, All Out War, Buried Alive.
Indecision.
Terror should actually
Who's come
be
out since the
considered-
flip of the century, yeah?
Yeah. But yeah, our scene was overlooked, but I will argue that our scene has been consistently, you know, moving and growing more than Boston, more than New York. I mean, we cover a lot more ground, you know, it's hundreds of miles, you know, our scene. I'm just talking about cities, but you know, our scene's popping up new bands every day. From bands back then, years ago, from Buried Alive, that's 20 years ago, to a band like Stick Together out of the same city 20 years later. I mean, it doesn't stop. You know, our area is really producing a lot of bands, a lot of good labels, everything, and it hasn't stopped. Where I would say Boston eased up, it goes through spurts. New York eased up, like they keep it alive. It's, you know, the greatest bands, but yeah, nothing is like the Pennsylvania hardcore scene. You know, in a week from now, the next dope band is going to be from Pennsylvania. So that's just how it is.
You know
what? They're suckers. You know, it's always the same types. Back when they were into it, it was the most important thing, and they wanted to judge everybody. And then when they're not into it, it's stupid, and why are you involved? And it makes them laugh, and it's ironic. But yeah, you always see those. You see those now. I mean, it's an open door. It's like a revolving door, hardcore. Out of every 10 kids that comes in, you're lucky if 3 stick around. But not even lucky. You know, it's like you just want the real dedicated, the highly emotional ones, the ones who find this like a spiritual thing. You only want them sticking around anyway. So you want the 7, 8 suckers to keep it moving, have a nice visit, buy some merch, and just bounce anyway. You know what I mean?
Word.
But yeah, it's to those old cats, you see them once in a while, they might give you a smirk and ask you, "Oh, you're still playing?" Like it's funny. You give them a smack in the mouth and keep walking. It's corny, but we know who's like that.
It's more of a family there than anywhere else.
Exactly.
Yeah,
We're the
and
biggest
they
fan.
lost out. Like we didn't lose out keeping doing this. Like it's Tuesday night. I just had a really good dinner with a lot of friends. I'm in Philadelphia. I don't live here.
No.
I'm hanging out having fun. Where are they at? Probably changing a diaper or getting yelled at by their second wife.